no, what am I gonna do? I just spent all of my money and my dad's money on shopping, and I have nothing left. Who do I get a loan from? Actually, come to think of it, Jennifer Lawrence just had her big break on Hunger Games, and I bet she got a fat check. So maybe I should just ask her for money. But I don't want to come off as desperate or force her to give me money, so I'm going to need to figure out a way to trick her. Hannah, what are you doing here? Hey Jen, just stopping by. So, come sit down. So, what's up? What's on your mind? Well, I was just passing through the neighborhood and I had this really important question, and I just feel like you're the perfect person to ask.
Oh, go ahead.
So, who do you think has more fun? Blondes, brunettes, or redheads?
It's interesting that you asked that question. But before I answer you, I would like to tell you a story my grandmother had once shared with me. There once was a famous pop star who had 3 children with amazing talents. One had the voice of an angel, another could dance like no one was watching, and the third was a genius on the guitar. The famous pop star would one day hand down her most prized platinum CD to the children who proves him or herself most worthy. This CD would give the child the responsibility to live up to the pop star's family name and carry on its legacy. As the 3 kids grew older, their talents developed and they all became prodigies in their own right. When the time came to hand down the platinum CD, the pop star found it impossible to choose which child to give it to. Instead, she made 2 copies of the CD and gave one to each child. And I say to you, Hannah Montana, that the same applies to the 3 hair colors that God has granted on many people, and which form the subject of your inquiry. Each of them considers it themselves the legitimate legacy to the family name, and each believes it possesses the necessary talents. But as with the hair colors, the question as to which of them is best remains in abeyance. This picture represents Day 1, Story 3. It's split into 2 different scenes. The one on the left depicts Saladin as almost kneeling in front of Melchizedek, which makes it look like Saladin is begging for money. From the story, we know Saladin is asking him the question about the 3 religions, but Melchizedek is wise, so he tells him a story about the 3 rings. After Melchizedek lends Saladin the money he needs, Saladin repays him in full and showers him with gifts. On the right side of the picture, it looks as if Saladin and Melchizedek are holding hands to signify friendship. Melchizedek is a Jewish character, and Jewish people were commonly known as moneylenders, because their religion didn't prohibit the practice. Because of this, non-Jewish people were resentful toward them, but Boccaccio does not fall into this belief. Instead, he portrays Melchizedek as a wise and fairly giving person. This story creates a basis of equality for all the big 3 religions, rather than placing Christianity above the others, which was a rare view during the medieval period. When Saladin asks, "I would be glad if you would tell me which of the 3 laws, whether the Jewish, the Saracen, or the Christian, you deem be truly authentic." He's trying to trap Melchizedek, because if Melchizedek only picks one religion, then it will lead him to an unwinnable argument, thus leaving Saladin to gain advantage over Melchizedek, which is exactly what he wants. Melchizedek carefully answers by telling him the legend of the 3 rings. Melchizedek's story is about a king who loved his 3 sons so equally that rather than bequeathing his expensive ring to one of them, he made 2 identical copies, so each kid got a ring. After he tells the story on page 44, Melchizedek says to Saladin, "And I say to you, my lord, that the same applies to the 3 laws which God the Father granted to his 3 peoples, and which form the subject of your inquiry. Each of them considers itself the legitimate heir to his estate. Each believes it possesses his one true law, and observes his commandments. But as with the rings, the question as to which of them is right remains in abeyance." The legend of the 3 rings represents how there is no right answer to the question, and all the religions are unique in their own way. At the time, none of those 3 world religions had much respect for the other 2. So for Boccaccio to assert Christianity, Judaism, and Islam were equal was a pretty revolutionary statement. This is another reason why the Decameron ended up on the church's index of prohibited books. Saladin is clever enough to know Melchizedek would never just give up his money, and he would have to ask a tricky question. But Melchizedek is wise enough to know the question is a trap. The point of the story is to make the audience more cautious before they answer questions and form their own opinions. This story also shows how wisdom is a reward itself. Melchizedek taught Saladin a lesson about religion and about how one has to tolerate other people's opinions in order to be wise. Religion is a major theme throughout all of the Decameron, and there are many stories concerning religion. For example, the first day, second story is about a Jew named Abraham and his Christian friend named Jehanot. Jehanot nags at Abraham for him to convert to Christianity. Abraham is tired of the annoyance, so he decides to go visit Rome to see if the Pope is a worthy person. He is prepared to become a Christian on one condition. He says on page 38 that first of all I should go to Rome and there observe the man whom you call the Vicar of God on earth, and examine his life and habits together with those of his fellow cardinals. When Jehanot heard this, he immediately does not want Abraham to go visit Rome because he knew the sinful ways the Pope lived and that Abraham would not want to convert after all. Abraham still went, and after his return, he claims that the Pope and the clergyman are the worst degenerates out there. They're drunks, sinners, and greedy people. In the end, Abraham decides to convert to Christianity because the church is growing despite the wickedness of its leaders. He figures that if the religion is flourishing even with the disgusting behavior of the clergy, who seem to be trying to drive it into the ground, then God must be on the side of Christianity. Another interesting fact: Abraham the Jew is described as an upright man of honesty, integrity, and discernment. This is not the typical description of a Jew in medieval literature. Jews were accused of causing the plague, poisoning the wells, and they were seen as threats to Christians because of their failure to accept Christ. Boccaccio is defying the standard beliefs of the time in the sense that he portrays people from different religions as respectable humans, and shows how two people with different beliefs can still be friends.
Boccaccio purposely includes characters and themes, such as those previously spoken about, related to the current issues and values of his time. For example, in the story we're focusing on, First Day, Third Story, religion is a major theme. During the time the Decameron was written, some people still held the beliefs of the Middle Ages, which included valor, faith, and transcendence, while others held the values of the Renaissance, which included enjoyment, business, and realism. In his stories, Boccaccio wasn't afraid to write blasphemously, and for that reason, religion is a common subject in his stories. His sacrilegious characters and plots were very polarizing, which made his literature interesting and unique. In the three-ring parable, Boccaccio chose the names Saladin and Melchizedek as his main characters. These names are significant because both allude to religious figures, although they existed in different time periods. Historically, Saladin was a Muslim military and political leader, or sultan. He led the Islamic forces into battle against the Christians during the Crusades, and was victorious in protecting the Holy Lands from Christian armies trying to claim them. Melchizedek is a religious figure in the Old Testament of the Bible. He was both a king and a priest with an association with Jerusalem, or the Holy Land, known by most monotheistic religions. His name is supposed to mean "My King is righteousness," and is thought to be the king of Jerusalem, although in the Bible it states that he's the king of Salem. Although the two characters were never mentioned together in history, Boccaccio uses these names to allude to a current religious conflict that was occurring at the time, referred to as the Crusades. The Crusades occurred from 1096 to 1291 AD in the Middle East, primarily. They were a series of wars between Christians and Muslims over the Holy Lands and that geographical region, with which they both considered to be sacred. In total, 8 major crusade expeditions occurred, led by Christian armies who ended up unsuccessful in reclaiming the land they believed rightfully to be theirs. As a result, in the Muslim world,
The Crusaders, also known as the Christian armies from Europe, were seen as immoral, bloody, and savage. The Crusades resulted in a resentment coming from both parties due to the widespread massacre of Muslims, Jews, and non-Christians the Crusaders caused. Boccaccio's Decameron was written not long after this violent period, probably composed between 1348 and 1353. This fact definitely contributed to why so many of his short stories included religious conflicts, including the first day third story about Saladin and Melchizedek. Religion being one of them, the Decameron includes a broad range of themes and genres, one of the reasons it became so popular. Boccaccio chose to title this book the Decameron because it means 10 days' work, representing the 10 days of storytelling told by the group of storytellers in the book. Although the storytellers in the book are members of the upper class, many of the characters in the story are members of the Nuova Gente, or the mercantile middle class, like Boccaccio. Born in 1313 in Paris, France, to a family of merchants, Boccaccio went to study canon law to hopefully find success, but ended up disliking it. He desired to be a writer, but his parents did not believe this would be a trade he could find success in. However, the Decameron was an immediate success, which had a large effect on the Italian Renaissance as a whole, which was emerging during Boccaccio's time. The Italian Renaissance occurred between the 14th and 17th centuries. At the time, Italy was divided into small city-states, which were in constant competition. Florence was a very wealthy place at the time, and people began investing and/or becoming patrons of artists and intellectuals as a way to display their wealth. As art and science was on the rise and religion became less of a focal point in people's lives, the humanist philosophy grew. Boccaccio is believed to be a large contributor to this movement through the Decameron, and as stated in Giovanni Boccaccio's biography on Britannica, without Boccaccio, the literary culmination of the Italian Renaissance would be historically incomprehensible.